Sounds good.
All right. Hey guys, welcome back. John Kelly, law enforcement life coach with your Sometimes Heroes Need Help podcast. Hey, I got Meredith Moran with me today. And you go, Meredith Moran. Household common name. Everyone knows who she is. And if you don't, you've been living under a rock. No, all right, I'll cut you some slack. Meredith, I met Meredith at a wellness conference in Orlando, and she had this really unique, amazing way of explaining trauma and surviving critical incidents. And I took like copious notes, right? And I've got all these notes, and then I'm like, hey, listen, I want to use some of your material because it's on point. And she's like, well, I'll just send you my PowerPoint. I'm like, oh, see, this is what we're talking about, sharing information, helping everybody get better. And I said, hey, Meredith, what you doing in a few weeks? I'd love to have you on the podcast. And wouldn't you know, she's made herself available for us. Thank you so much for being here, Meredith. Honor. It's such a pleasure to see you again. And I just love that you have a way of explaining some pretty complex things that just make sense to the layman. And, you know, that's invaluable. But before we get into all that, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you became this awesome.
Oh, well, thank you. And thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
So, yeah, I was 15 years old and I said, I want to be a police officer. And I did, much to the chagrin of my father, who was not happy about that choice.
Can't imagine that went over well.
No, that didn't go over well at all. But I started it with the Police Explorer program. I did that, ended up going off to university, got my 4-year degree, and then came back and joined the same department that I had been a police explorer with.
Cool.
Yeah. So I was there for 6.5 years, really and the whole life plan was I'm gonna do local law enforcement for a few years, and then I'm gonna go to the feds and then retire and teach at a university. That was at 15, that was the plan.
Wait, how did that work out for you?
Yeah, that's clearly it went off the rails.
Oh well.
You tell the universe this is my plan, and the universe says, maybe not.
And the universe laughs.
Yes. So I ended up about 6.5 years into my career. Two things happened that really kind of changed the course of things. First of all, I got really severe test anxiety and I couldn't qualify on my firearm.
Okay.
They put me through retraining, couldn't qualify, sent me to the department psychologist, and he said, hey, in a real life shooting situation, I don't think there's going to be a problem. This is test anxiety.
Right.
But I couldn't get past it.
Gotcha.
So I ended up taking the resignation. And at the time, I was able to just transfer right into and get hired with our local police academy.
Okay.
But at the same time, all of that was going on, one of my fellow officers, a guy I'd known for a long time, ended up dying by suicide. And he'd kind of hidden it really well. He had killed somebody in the line of duty probably 3 or 4 years prior to that.
Okay.
And when you look back on it and kind of everything that came out afterwards, he had PTSD, and It was undiagnosed and untreated. And so I went off to the police academy. I joined the critical incident stress management team and started doing that. And at the same time, I thought, well, I'm faculty at the academy. I might as well go get my doctorate in counseling, because I had a master's degree in criminology.
Okay.
So the overachiever that I can be sometimes.
Yeah, I was going to say, you got a lot of letters after your name there.
I do.
It's quite the resume.
And there used to be more letters, but I've taken some.
Okay, good, because letters can be confusing. If there's one thing I really can't stand are acronyms. So let's just spell it out, okay?
Yeah. So I ended up getting my doctorate in counseling. I left the police academy and started working for a local substance use treatment facility. Here, I'm up here in Pinellas County, Florida, and got licensed. And then in 2019, I said, I think I want to do counseling. That's why I got
Right.
this degree. I want to work with cops and first responders. And so I opened up my own business, and
And front line, right?
it's, yeah, it started out as Meredith Moran Counseling because I didn't know what else to call it.
It's
Um,
okay.
and,
Yeah.
and then last year I rebranded as Frontline Wellness.
Frontline Wellness. Awesome. And we'll
Mhm.
we'll put all that information in the show notes so people can find you and talk to you and figure some things out. That's
Yeah,
um
absolutely.
that's awesome. You know what I love about it is that, listen, you did the law enforcement thing, and that anxiety, that's all right, listen, all right, this isn't happening. How can I continue to be a part of the solution?
Yeah,
You didn't say fuck you, I'm done. Yeah, you said,
right.
all right, this is an obstacle. How do I turn this negative into a positive?
Mhm.
And that's awesome.
And in fact, while I was at the academy, I joined the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office as a reserve deputy.
Mm-hmm.
And just kind of some, I think, having stepped away from it, not having that pressure and some different training practices, I ended up
Of
qualifying.
course you did. Of
It's
course
always
you
been a,
did.
yeah, it's always been a struggle for me,
Right.
but I got through it and I did it.
Right. Good.
So
That's
yeah,
great
then
to
I was,
have that in your rear view. You know what I mean? That
yeah,
that little nagging little like, God damn it, But you did it.
yeah.
So fast forward, you've got your practice now. And the thing I love about you is that you were on the job. This is, I love clinicians, right? But the one thing, right, you always hear, right, we beat this into the ground, is that, well, they really don't know what it's like to be on perimeter. They don't know what it's like to go to the domestic. They don't know what it's like to get blood on them. They don't, well, you
I
know.
had, having been through EAP as a cop, because
Yeah,
I went, we all go through our struggles. I'm like, oh, let me go
sure.
talk to an EAP person. I'm like sitting through this, and I'm sure she was a very good clinician, but I'm sitting
Right,
through this going, she has no idea what my world looks like.
right,
And then I've had agencies, when I first started, I had an agency tell me that they had an officer who went to an EAP clinician, and that clinician just started crying in the middle of the session.
yeah. I'm traumatizing the clinician by telling them the effed up story.
Right. And so that's the piece that I love that I bring, is that, I'll have people sitting in my office and they go, well, this, I'm like, hey, bring it. You tell me what you need to
Right,
tell
right,
me,
right.
because you're not going to shock me.
Sure. No, that's great. That's a great starting place in a relationship between a clinician and somebody seeking help, is that
Mhm.
you had your foot in both camps. You know what it's like, and you know how best to steer the conversation and keep things going in the right direction. I think
Right.
that's really awesome. So your program, your presentation, surviving critical incidents, talk about that for me. How did you bring that to, how do you bring that to a conference?
Well, so it was kind of weird how I ended up at that conference. So
Right.
I've been developing these out for a while,
Okay.
and so Dr. Seth Hickerson
Yes, of
from
course, I
My Steady
remember him.
Mind,
Yep.
I met My Steady Mind at the law enforcement, the IACP Officer Wellness Conference last March.
Okay.
And I went through their training. I went through the My Steady Mind training,
Okay.
and they introduced me to Sean,
Okay.
who runs first responder conferences.
Gotcha.
So I got in touch with her and said,
Perfect.
hey, I'd love to come and speak at your conference. And that's how I ended up there.
Awesome. Awesome. And so you come rolling out with the surviving critical incidents
my T-Rex.
Presentation. Yeah, the T and I think it was great how you started because I think sometimes, the big trauma and little trauma. I thought that that was cool because not all trauma is dead bodies in your arms.
Right.
Not all stress is horrific scenes of violence and chaos.
Mm-hmm.
And those my takeaway was those little traumas need to be addressed just as much as the big ones.
Absolutely, because those things layer. So, the 50th time I've been to that old lady's house who doesn't can't find her keys, and yeah, I want to help her, but dear God, are
Right,
there any
right.
other resources available other than me? And that domestic that isn't really a domestic, it's just two people that can't get along, but now the neighbors are calling, and then I've got my supervisor in my ear about some bullshit
But
that,
my TPS forms.
yeah, about my tea. Yes.
Yes, Office Space. Got to throw a shout out to the yeah.
Best movie. I used to have a I used to have a red stapler at Par. I don't
That's
know what happened.
hysterical, right? But yeah, it's all that bullshit, right?
It's all that bullshit. And then I go home and, maybe I have a spouse and kids. And, even if we have a great relationship, there's, hey, welcome home. The water heater busted today. Or, little Johnny got an F in math today or got called to the principal. And now it's like, I just came off of all of this 8, 10, or 12 hours of being on high alert. All I want to do is de-escalate. And now I'm getting hit with all of this other stuff from home.
Right. And I thought that it was really cool how you brought out in the conference was that with all that going on. See, I think we discount the little T's, and we
We
don't.
do.
And so, if there is a Marjorie Stoneham Douglas massacre, well, everybody's got their antenna up, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
this is horrible, and you're stepping over dead kids, and who's doing right. And we, when we need time to recover from something like that, and you're saying 18 to 24 hours, right? But if we and is that for both traumas, Meredith? Like,
It's from what I've read, and that I got that from another conference, as a matter of fact.
yeah,
That's those big traumas.
gotcha.
It's kind of actually that roller coaster that Gil Martin talks about, that roller coaster that we go on when we're working patrol, where it's like,
Right,
okay, our adrenaline is way up here, and then we come way back down, and then we're whack up again, and that
right,
that crisis roller coaster that we're in all the time. It takes time for our body to regulate itself again.
right.
And unfortunately, in this job, we don't get that, because I work a 12-hour shift. And maybe I work some overtime, or I have to go home and deal with my family, not deal with my family, but I have to go home and do family stuff. And
Right.
so I never get that time for my body to naturally rebalance itself.
I gotcha. And I know that there was a stat you threw out there right at the beginning. It was like 188 critical incidents over the course of a career. And
Mm-hmm.
I said to myself, that's I was I didn't want to I didn't want to be the monkey wrench in your presentation. I was going to go, that's bullshit, because like I worked Central Broward, District 5, West Fort Lauderdale for the entirety of
Mm-hmm.
my career. There were legit critical incidents, nonsense 4 or 5 times a week. I
Yeah.
mean,
And so
so yeah,
that study,
yeah,
yeah,
but
that's a large
I know
study, and
that's a great.
look,
I was like,
that's looking at an average
yeah, I'm
of.
like, but what about the guys that are working, Pompano midnights who don't shut their
Mhm.
emergency equipment off, that are
Yeah,
just running every night? You're talking thousands of critical
hmm,
incidents over the course of a career, and
absolutely.
we do a horrible job of figuring this shit out.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, but so you take those guys and you average them with, you
Right,
know, the guy who works in the middle
Mayberry.
of nowhere,
Yeah,
Mayberry, he has one critical incident in his entire career.
right.
So, but yeah,
Yeah,
it's
it's
like I
crazy.
said, For some people it's higher, and and that's only law enforcement. When you're talking, firefighters, EMS, who are, they're the ones scraping bodies off the street, or
Yeah. It's overwhelming.
Mhm.
It really is. So talk to us about that threat response, that fight, flight, or freeze, and
Fight or freeze.
how that how we use that, to our advantage, and then how does that sometimes create a problem for us?
Yeah, so on duty, we got to be in that state. And we have to be kind of hyper vigilant and up, always looking around, watching our backs. When I talk to clients, and the whole first part of that presentation that you heard is really the first session that I do with a client.
Okay.
So the whole T-Rex, survival brain, thinking brain stuff, I do that with clients.
Okay.
And when I break it down like that, I've had clients sit back in the chair and look at me and say, okay, so I'm not crazy.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, you're not crazy, you're just overstimulated. Your brain is overcompensating for past trauma, and you don't need those survival skills right now.
Right.
And I like to talk about a scale, a 1 to 10 scale. So nobody escalates from 0 to 10 in the blink of an eye. If people are escalating that fast, they're running it like a 7 all the time. But if I'm at a 7 all the time, that's my baseline, and I think that's 0.
Makes sense.
And so on the road, when we're working the road, or detective, we're on the job, I got to run at a 7. I got to be alert and hyper vigilant and know what's going, you keep your head on a
Right.
swivel, you never sit alone, all of that stuff. The problem is that fight or flight switch can get locked into the on position. And not just with first responders, anybody who's had complex trauma. If I grow up in trauma, that fight or flight switch gets locked into the on position. And now I spend my entire existence running at a 7. And so I'm hyper vigilant. I'm always waiting for the next shoe to drop. Everything is a threat to my brain.
Can I interrupt you? I think you just made sense to something I was thinking about. That's why I think another reason why we tend to just associate with people in our profession, because if I'm at a 7, they're at a 7 too. So 7's normal.
Right.
And if I'm with normal people that aren't on the job and I'm walking around at a 7, they're checking me going, what the hell's wrong with you? And so, well, what do you mean? You don't understand? And then that's why I start distancing myself from them, and I start hanging around with people that accept me being a 7.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but that
okay.
just like made perfect sense to me on why we don't necessarily shun people from our past lives, but if they're constantly busting my balls about what I'm doing, you know what? Eventually I stop calling them, because I don't want to have to keep rehashing the conversation. So I just hang out with everybody who's walking around hyper vigilant.
Absolutely. And the opposite of that is that we look at those so-called normal people, those people who aren't on the job, and we can't grasp the concept of, why aren't you looking at, why aren't you looking over your shoulder all the time?
Why don't you have a gun on you right now?
Right. How can you possibly be so relaxed all the time? And so, then we end up having that, not conflict, but it just stops working for us.
Right. Right.
And so we gravitate toward those people that understand us.
Yeah. And all the time, we need those people from our prior lives to stay healthy and balanced. And we shut the door sometimes abruptly on them.
Yeah. One of my saving graces was my best friend who lived with me. She was total civilian.
Oh,
And yeah, and I would come home and she was a good balance for me because she would kind of check me, but also be like, okay, it's not that bad. Let's go, let's go hang out and go dancing. Let's go do something. In
right.
fact, I told her once, I said, I think I tainted her because we were watching a news program, a news story about a homicide, and immediately she said, the husband did it. And it turned out to be the gardener or something. But I'm like, oh,
Ah,
oh, I think I've tainted you.
that's
Sorry.
okay. It's usually the husband. You can, you're seldom wrong if you blame the spouse.
Right. I
That's
was like,
funny.
oh, I think I've dragged you
That's
into my
funny. That's
into
funny.
my world.
Eh,
So, but the other problem with being hyper vigilant all the time is that we're pumping all of those chemicals that are designed for fight or flight into our system on a regular basis.
and
It
we've heard about this. Is it
may
cortisol?
cortisol, adrenaline, epinephrine, um, and that stuff isn't made to be in our bodies all the time. It is designed for, there's the T-Rex. I need a quick burst of energy to get away. And then I let that stuff out of my system. I sweat it out.
What's the problem with having cortisol being pumped and released and produced in your body on a continual basis? What problems does that cause for us?
And I'm not a medical doctor. Let's just clarify
It's
that.
okay. It's
It
okay.
higher stress levels, it's not good for our heart. It hangs out in our system, and it helps us, it doesn't, we can't lose weight. It helps us stay overweight because it hangs on
Fat
to that
stores, right?
fat storage. So yeah, it also breaks down our muscles. So the stuff that stuff is designed for, again, quick release and sweating it out. If it's sitting in our muscles, it acts like a tenderizer and kind of breaks down the meat in our muscles.
Hmm.
So
I think there's a bunch of studies out there, Meredith, that, you know, we have people in this industry that die of heart
mhm,
attacks and that aren't overweight,
right.
that are relatively what we would consider healthy,
Hmm.
but because of a prolonged exposure to high levels of cortisol, because they're in units that deal with trauma on a continual daily basis,
Right.
this is shortening their lives.
Hmm. Well, I mean, how many guys do you know that, they retire and then within 6 to 10 years of retirement, they drop dead of a heart attack?
Yeah, I'm like I'm on borrowed time right now. You're gonna depress me here, and then I'm gonna
Oh,
have to pay
no,
for your
I think
services.
I think you've got, I think you sound like you're starting that you've gotten it
A
under
little
control.
bit. I'm no longer at a
You're working,
7. I'm at a six and
you're
a
working
half.
at it.
Six and a
Okay.
half. Oh
I'll
my
take a six
God.
and a half.
Oh shit. But you're right. But that makes sense. I mean, we're running around at a 7. We're hyper vigilant. All these chemicals are getting produced for a fight that isn't ongoing. It's not necessary,
Right.
but our mind is telling us that it is,
Hmm.
and it's having some serious health consequences for us the longer this goes on.
Yeah.
Um,
That's the thing about that survival brain, is it doesn't know the difference between real danger and perceived danger. And so if it perceives danger all the time, that's why I did that. In the conference, I do that experiment where it's like, hey, look around the room and tell me what's dangerous to you. And I had one lady at another conference sitting under a giant glass chandelier, and she's like, this thing is dangerous. I'm like, okay, well, let's examine that. Is it shaking? Are pieces falling from it? Does the ceiling look like it's cracking?
right.
No. Okay, so it's not a danger to you right now. It could be, but in this moment, you're safe. And that's the key, is when we start to teach that survival brain that in this moment, I am safe. Yeah, that guy could come through the front door of the restaurant with a gun and we're not safe. But in this moment, I'm safe.
Right.
and I can start to relax and become what Dr. Hickerson says, relaxed but aware, as opposed to jacked up and hyper vigilant all the
So
time.
when we're relaxed and aware, those cortisol levels aren't spiking. We're not dumping
Mm-hmm.
adrenaline
Correct.
and everything. We're at a kind of like an awareness
Mm-hmm.
without being that fight or flight going on with us.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. That's a
And
good
that's
place
a
to be.
healthier place to be. That's a much healthier place to be.
That's a great place to be because you're not comatose, you're not unaware,
Right.
right? We don't ever want to be unaware of
Right.
anything, but you're not perceiving threats that in the moment don't exist.
Correct. Yeah.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So how do we get to that? How do we get to that rest and digest and how do we do that transition? Because
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say that a lot of people listening to this, they walk around at a 6, 7, or 8, and they think that that's normal. And so the goal of this is for them to recognize threats that are real and
Right.
respond accordingly, but but maintain an awareness that keeps them safe, that doesn't trigger the release of cortisol and adrenaline.
Right.
So
Yeah.
how the hell do we do that?
Well, the first thing I teach clients is this idea of relaxed body and learning to walk around in our daily lives, maybe not on duty, obviously, but in our regular day-to-day lives in a relaxed body, checking in with our body every once in a while and saying, do I have tension in my body? Are my shoulders way up in my ears? You know,
I would go to bed. I would go to bed with clenched fists, like, and I would look at my hands and I'd go, and I would slowly uncurl my fists,
mm-hmm.
and I'd have to do this, make a conscious effort to all right, open your hands, John, open your hands, and that would be the start of me starting to relax. Meredith, I'd go to bed like this, like I was getting ready
Yeah,
to pound somebody.
yeah.
Crazy.
And that's if we can learn to live our lives in a relaxed body. If I'm all tensed up and jacked up all the time,
Yeah.
that's a sign to my survival brain that there is danger around me, that I need to react to something. So if I can get my body to relax,
Mm.
I can get that survival brain to relax and kind of go to sleep. And then the best part of that is now I'm in thinking brain. Now I'm making rational decisions and I'm able to have conversations and remember things and focus and do all that stuff that is really hard to do when I'm in emotional brain, because those two pieces don't work together at the same time. They don't talk to each other.
Okay.
Um and so if I can get survival brain to relax and I can be in thinking brain, then I can be a more well-rounded person.
Right. That just makes, it's I love listening to you because it makes me think, we wonder why we say emotional decisions are never good decisions, right? Because you're not
Mm-hmm.
thinking. Your
Right.
brain is not thinking, so
Yeah.
you're doing stupid shit, and you're not making informed decisions because the wrong side of your brain is driving the bus.
Right. Yeah. And emotional brain, survival brain, it only makes decisions based on our past history.
Hmm.
So survival brain will say, this thing that's happening right now looks like this bad thing that happened in my past,
Hmm.
and it must be the same thing, and I have to react accordingly.
Hmm. Okay.
So, I use the example with combat veterans. Fourth of July fireworks
Hmm.
sound very much like gunshots and mortars.
Mm-hmm.
And survival brain says, I must still be in combat, and it will respond accordingly.
Right.
If we can get survival brain to calm down and to go to sleep when we don't need it,
Mm-hmm.
then we can make that differentiation and say, oh no, it's 4th of July. That's what's going on. I'm not under fire.
What are some other techniques to help calm that survival brain? Would meditation be one?
Meditation would work, yeah. And I think meditation is a good practice on a regular basis to be able to tap into that breathing, be able to tap into that feeling of relaxation. And one of the myths about, because I've talked to people about meditation and they're like, well, I can't stop my thinking. And that's not what meditation is. We can't stop thinking. We never can.
Right.
But meditation is, I'm focusing on something, I'm focusing on my breathing. And as the thoughts come in, I'm just acknowledging them and letting them go. I'm not getting stuck in them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I'm just, yep, there's a thought, and let it go. And I continue to focus on my breathing and focus on relaxing my body. Breathing, deep breathing.
Is that combat breathing that we've heard so much about?
That combat breathing, again, Dr. Hickerson calls it BAMO, breathe and move on. Just when we're breathing shallowly, that hyperventilation, survival brain says, oh, there must be danger. So if I can slow my breathing, pull it deep into my belly,
being
then
very deliberate, very deliberate inhale, exhale.
Survival brain to go to sleep. So those are the two things that I teach right up front: is relaxing your body and breathing.
Excellent. And that's something that you could do, even on your way home in the car, right? I mean, you're coming off a shift, you can even do that in your driveway, before you walk in the house, couldn't you?
Yeah. And I think you had a previous, and I don't remember her name. You had a previous guest that talked about, if you, on your drive home, if you have a significant drive home, setting yourself up for that success.
Sure. It could be Cindy Doyle. It could be Sheila Russell. It could be, some great women out there doing some great things. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, taking that time to, okay, I'm going to transition from this space to this space. So I want to check in with my body, and am I tense? Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, I am tense because I've been on duty. Let me relax. Let me get my shoulders relaxed. Let me take some deep breaths. Let me start thinking positively. Mindset is huge. What we say to our brain is what our brain believes. So if we tell ourselves that the world is an awful place, then that's what our brain is going to see. So when we go through these exercises, things like making ourselves a gratitude list, making ourselves a positivity list, you know what, a bunch of really bad shit happened on duty today, but what's the really positive stuff that happened? Maybe I drove down the street and some little kid waved at me, and I turned my lights on for him and he got really excited and give me the thumbs up. Hey, that's cool.
Right. That's you reframing something, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
It doesn't need to be, and that's what I every morning when I get up, I take Mr. Wallace. He's my bull mastiff. We go for a walk in the morning.
Big boy.
But nobody's up, nothing's stirring. It's the birds are just starting to wake up, and I smile, and I look up at the sky, and I kind of like spin around, not fast, but I just take inventory of like, are you fucking kidding me? Like,
yeah.
Listen, I don't know what today's gonna bring, but in this moment, I'm present and I'm thankful, right? I'm thankful that I'm here. And that I come back into the house and that sets the tone for me.
Absolutely. The way we set the tone in the morning is the way our day is going to go. And then I tell clients, have a notebook by your bed, and before your head hits the pillow, before you go to sleep, write down 5 gratitudes or 10 gratitudes,
Sure.
write down 5 positive things. Or, if I have clients with self-esteem issues, write down, 5 things I like about myself. But put that on a piece of paper, get that floating in your brain before you go to sleep, so that now my brain can when my brain has that downtime, it's processing positive and not negative.
That's a great idea. It's like the last thing you think about before you go to bed is a positive version
Mhm.
of you and what you're trying to do in this space. And yeah, you're right. It's why when you see a scary movie or something, you go to bed, you have nightmares.
Exactly.
I mean, I'm
It's,
not a doctor, but I mean, like that makes sense, right?
yeah, it's, our brain processes in our downtime, and our emotional brain doesn't. So, you have that call where somebody dies in your arms, or
Mm-hmm.
you have to wade through bodies, whatever it is. Your brain has to process that out, and it will do that in the form of dreams and flashbacks. And so, yeah, within the first 24 to 48 hours, there's probably going to, after a critical incident, you're going to have a lot of that stuff.
Mm.
What we have to do is we have to acknowledge that this is our brain doing some normal processing of a really abnormal situation that nobody should have to see.
Mm-hmm.
And we do some things to kind of mitigate it, and it should go away. If it doesn't, then we look at what's the next level. Okay, now maybe I need to seek therapy. Maybe I need to talk to somebody who is culturally competent, who knows what I'm going through, but who can look at it from the outside. Because that's my thing, is I'm not in your emotional bubble.
Right.
So I can step back and go, okay, well, have you tried this? Have you thought about that? And I'll have people say, oh, no, that never occurred to me,
Right.
over something really simple. But because I'm in my emotional bubble, I can't think through
Sure.
that.
Sure. I've got some guys that I coach for 22-0, and they help with the reprocessing and associating different emotions with the memories, right? Not removing the memories, but
EMDR stuff.
not so much on the EMDR side, but more just allowing the brain to have different emotions attach to the memory.
Okay.
Um, and it's pretty neat. Again, there, but you don't know about that. You don't know about that unless you seek this.
Right.
EMDR. I have got a couple buddies that are using EMDR to help with trauma, and oh, if you took it at face value, you'd call bullshit. You'd
Right.
go, wait, I'm going to move my finger. You follow it with your eyes, and then everything's going to be or obviously oversimplifying. But when you start looking at the science and you start asking questions, and somebody that's not in the emotional bubble that can view
Mm-hmm.
and make some suggestions to give you some skill sets that you don't know anything about. Oh, so my eye movement, it's mimicking REM sleep, and REM sleep helps heal my body and mind, and that's
Mm-hmm.
what's going on here. And oh shit, and I start feeling better. And that's the thing. It's like, listen, you don't know what you don't know, so
Yeah.
be open to the possibility that there's things out there that can help you, other than the bottle, other than
Which doesn't
destructive
help.
behavior, other than stepping out on your spouse, other than getting addicted to God knows what. Right? Those are not
Mhm.
fixes to anything. Right? They're
No,
delaying the inevitable.
those are just cover-ups.
Yep.
That doesn't, that's like putting a band-aid on a broken bone. And I'm certified in a procedure called ART, accelerated resolution therapy, which is
Okay.
an offshoot of EMDR. And I got to tell you, I love it. I've done so many cool things with people where they've come in with just this stuff, that this trauma that they can't get rid of. And it's like, okay, cool. Let's change those pictures in your head and make your brain believe something different. And they walk out of my office, or they come back a couple weeks later and go, oh my God, I haven't thought about that thing in 2 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah,
I haven't
that's
been
special.
triggered by this in a week.
Right.
Like, cool.
Right. Like you don't have to live with all this emotional pain. It's just
That's it.
not necessary.
No,
Not
you can
necessary.
choose to, yeah, we can all make choices, and you can choose to let that go. And there's a lot of people out there that want to help you do that.
That's awesome. If do we have a few more minutes? Are you good?
Yeah, I got plenty of time.
Okay. Um, the 4 R's, how to survive, the 4 R's.
Uh-huh.
Realization, recognize, respond, and resist. Um, can we talk about that? And then I want to go over the do's and don'ts for the first 24 hours. And then I
Okay.
think that would be a good way to kind of wrap things up if you're cool with that.
Sure. Let me actually gonna bring my PowerPoint up so I know what I'm reading.
Yeah.
So yeah, so the 4 R's, um, this idea of realizing, so we want to realize that trauma has an effect on us.
Okay.
That the things that we, especially in first responder land, the things that we see and do affect us. They affect our brain, they affect our body. And when we understand there is that potential for something to affect us, then we can go forward and fix it.
Right. Don't dismiss it.
Don't dismiss it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Don't just go, I've seen 1,000 of those.
So kind of
It,
just, first things first, let's admit or realize that this can be problematic if we don't go about dealing with it the right way.
mm-hmm,
All
mm-hmm.
right.
And then recognize what those signs and symptoms are. What are the signs? There's a ton of signs and symptoms of critical incident stress. Again, maybe the nightmares, maybe the intrusive thoughts, maybe I'm feeling more irritable than usual, sleeping more, sleeping less.
Detached, isolated,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe I'm snapping at people more than I should be.
outbursts, aggressive behavior.
Yeah.
Uh,
Inability to concentrate,
hmm, okay.
inability to focus.
Right. So those are some things that we might be looking for, might be going on in ourselves or in the people in our circle.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then we want to respond. So with responding, it's everybody needs to look at the officers, everybody needs to look at themselves and their coworkers as with this trauma-informed lens that, this bad thing has happened. So how do we fix it? How do we help you fix your brain
Mm,
so that you don't fall into PTSD
right.
or alcoholism or something else? How do we respond early? And sometimes, for organizations, sometimes that's a problem because they either don't know how to respond. Maybe I've heard of organizations that don't care.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, I
yeah,
think, and to that point, Meredith, I think we're getting better.
I think we are too.
I think, some of the old mindset of, we hear it, suck it up, it's not a problem. Yeah, that record, right? That's about on the same utility as a record right now, right?
Right.
That mindset, that approach doesn't work.
Yeah.
Doesn't work. We're in the digital age now, right? Let's get with the times here. It hasn't worked for us from the beginning of time till now.
Right.
So let's
Yeah.
let's let's be open to the fact that maybe we need to address this a different way.
Yeah. And I think as you see newer generations of people moving up through the ranks, people who maybe a little more in tune to these ideas.
Yeah, Chief Ogden was at the
Uh-huh.
seminar.
Yeah.
I want a progressive in a nice way, not in a
Mhm.
liberal way, but progressive in his thinking about mental health and how do we take care of our people? How do we do a better job? Um,
Right.
I can tell you that the list of people that I know that are that care deeply about their people is greater than the list of people I know that don't give a shit.
Right.
That dynamic is shifting,
Yeah,
and I think
absolutely.
that's a great thing. That's a great
Yeah.
thing.
And I think it's also, but it's also, there's also education involved because
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of people who don't know this stuff. I, last year did a frontline supervision presentation for, an agency in Virginia. And it was the chief and the entire command staff all the way down to the sergeants. It was a small agency, but
Sure.
the entire command staff was in this presentation about, how do you help your frontline people get through critical incidents and,
Right.
through their careers. And that was amazing.
It's nice to see that somebody gives a shit.
Yeah.
How about that? How about that? And then the final R, resist
Resist re-traumatization.
re-traumatization.
Yeah. So we want to do the best we can not to re-traumatize people. We don't want to, on the critical incident, if the line of duty shooting, yeah, there's stuff that has to be done. There's interviews and stuff like that has to be done. But hey, why don't we give that officer a minute to collect themselves? Give that officer a minute to maybe call their spouse and go, hey, I'm all right.
Right. Sure.
Hey, have you eaten today? Let's let you have some food and some water. And then let's the whole, I know we
You
have to
mean so
collect.
I shouldn't take your gun and put you in the back seat of a patrol car by yourself?
Yeah, you shouldn't do that.
Oh, okay, good, good, yeah.
Explaining things like, okay, this is why we have to take your
Isn't it?
gun.
Isn't it? I mean, God damn. Don't anybody talk. Don't nobody talk to John.
Don't talk to him. Don't. Yeah.
All I wanted,
Hmm.
don't talk to John. Don't talk to John. Don't talk to
Yeah.
him. You can't talk to him. You're not allowed to talk to him.
Yeah. So maybe we move those parameters and go, okay, don't talk to John about the facts, but let's talk to John
How
about, hey,
about
how you feeling?
can I go over and give John a hug and let him know it's going to be okay?
Yeah.
Right? Come
Well, John,
on.
how you
We can,
feeling right now?
we
Do
can
you
be
need something
better,
to
right?
eat?
We can do
Yeah,
better at this. We can
we
do
can
better at
absolutely
this.
do better at this.
Oh my God. And finally, Meredith, some do's and don'ts for the first 24 hours. What do we want to be doing? What don't we want to be doing after a critical incident to maximize our recovery, our resiliency,
Mhm.
and keep the negative side effects from really becoming issues for us? How do we do that?
Absolutely. So some of the do's is we want to exercise and we want to alternate that with rest.
I love exercise.
Yeah. Get those sweat those chemicals out of your body
Okay.
and then let your body rest. And exercise doesn't have to be, I'm gonna go run a marathon. Exercise can be, okay, I'm gonna take my dog out for a walk first in the morning. We're gonna walk around the block and we're gonna get a little sweat on and we're just gonna get that stuff out.
Good. Okay.
We want to keep busy. Um, Hobbies, anything like that. We don't want to sit and let our mind just rehash everything that's going on. Talking to people is helpful.
Sure.
Talking about how I'm feeling.
Which we're really awesome at.
I know we're really good at that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm. Not so much. All right, but and that can be anybody. It can be trusted friends, partner. It can be your neighbor who trims your bushes on your side
Yeah.
of the yard, and
Yeah.
it can be
It could
anybody.
be, yeah, it could even be the, the EAP counselor.
Right.
You know, it could be somebody from your peer support team. It could be your chaplain,
Right.
you know. Keeping your schedule as normal as possible. This is not the time to make big life decisions, and that's a don't make big life decisions. This
Sure.
is not the time to go, all right, we're selling the house and we're moving to Bora Bora.
I love it. I love it. I'm in. Yeah, no, I get it. Yeah, because again, because that could mean that maybe the wrong side of the brain's doing some of the thinking for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And give yourself permission to feel bad. It's okay to feel like shit. It's okay
Mm,
to go, this sucked.
yeah,
It sucked that I had to do that. And you know, just because it's your job doesn't mean that you're not a human being.
right,
And give yourself permission to go, yeah, that sucked. I hated that.
right,
And some of the don't use alcohol and drugs.
right.
Again, don't make big life changes. Don't label yourself as crazy. That's a big thing with us is we're like, oh, well, I'm going crazy.
Mm.
You're just overstimulated.
How do we know that we're not really going crazy though? See, that's I'm always thinking that maybe that's the case. And so no, less I joke, but yeah, so
Yeah.
you sit
It's
back and you
you're
go,
not
I'm
losing
losing
your
my
mind.
mind right now.
Yeah. And you're not.
Right.
Your brain is processing. That's again that the reoccurring thoughts, the dreams, the flashbacks, those are perfectly normal in the beginning.
And let me stop you. When you say in the beginning, Meredith, I know, God, you're gonna fucking hate me for this. Define in the beginning. If I'm having these dreams, I'm gonna have these dreams, thoughts, and experiences while my brain's trying to sort out what has occurred
Mm-hmm.
over time period X, a week or two. And what if I'm having these same dreams, Meredith, in 3 months or 4 months or 5 months?
Yeah. So I think, yeah, so everybody's different.
Yep.
Everybody's brain processes differently. Um, a week or two is probably good. Some, you know, give or take, there may be
Sure.
longer. But yeah, 3 months out, I'm still having these dreams, flashbacks, all of that. Then that might be time to go, hey, maybe I need to seek
Got
some
to take
help.
it to the next level
Therapy.
here.
Yeah.
I might need
Let's
some
talk to somebody
assistance.
else.
Good.
Yes.
Good.
Let's talk
Okay.
to a professional.
So you got to give the brain a little bit of time to work its magic on its own. But if you're not feeling any better and you're not processing, that might be a great indicator to go talk to a competent, culturally competent person who can really
Yeah.
start accelerating the healing process for you.
Yeah. But again, you do have to give it time. I mean, it's I had a client who unfortunately died by suicide, and a month later I was still something happened that really triggered me, and I went to my therapist, and he's like, okay, so you were supposed to be over this suicide in a month. I'm like, yes. He goes, why? Because you're a
Right.
therapist.
Yeah, you're
Take some more
human.
time to get over it, move on. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
you're
like take some
human.
time to
Yeah.
process that.
Yeah. It makes sense, doesn't it, when you hear it from somebody else?
Yeah, it's and it's exactly the same thing I would have said to a client was, well, you may not get over this in a month.
Right.
Let's take some more time to process it. But of course, listen to what I say, not what I do.
Yeah, right. That sometimes we fall into that. I gotta tell you, like I could do this forever. You have just been great. I really appreciate you taking the
You,
time to sit down and share with us some of your thoughts. If there's one thought, Meredith, that you could leave the listener with, they're driving into work, they're driving home from work. If there's something that you could leave them with that makes them better for hearing it than not, what would that be?
I've been preparing this because I've been listening to your podcast, so I'm like, oh my god.
You've got me tagged. That's my classic. What do you got? What do you got for the listener? Oh my God. So what do you got for us?
I think my one thought is that it's okay to not be okay sometimes.
Right.
And to acknowledge that, we are human beings. There's nobody out there who is RoboCop.
Right.
When you put on the uniform and we put on that armor, deep down inside, we're still human. And the stuff that we see and the stuff that we may have to do, it's gonna affect us. And that's okay, because we can learn to deal with it and we can learn to fix it. But give ourselves permission to be human and to say, okay, you know what? I'm not okay today.
That's awesome. Ladies and gentlemen, Meredith Moran, thank you for taking the time. It was really great seeing you again.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed this thoroughly.
I almost forgot. See, you didn't check me on this.
Oh,
If I want to get in touch with you, if I want, how do I do that? Tell me how I do that.
my website is, if you Google Frontline Wellness, 2 words, or it's flwellness.org. That is all my contact is right there on that website.
And you're here in Florida,
I'm here in Tampa Bay.
you are the definition of culturally competent. And so if I want to reach out or run something by you, you're available for me.
Absolutely. Yeah. On my website, there's a contact me page, and you can shoot me an email. It has my email, my phone number. Anybody can reach out, and I will be happy to answer questions or take on clients.
That's awesome.
I do telehealth, so I can really see anybody in the state of Florida.
Yeah, that's big now, isn't it? Right. The only good thing that came out of COVID was we don't have to go to a doctor's office to get help anymore. We can do that over the internet. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, Meredith Moran, thanks again, hon. It was awesome seeing you again.
Thank you. It was good seeing you. I had a good time today. Thanks.
Thank you.